Today I'm going to be talking about learning new skills, and the first point I want to emphasize is that it's an easy thing to do. It really is. It only takes 20 hours.
Does it take to get good at fighting games? Surely it must take at least a gazillion hours, right? Here's the actual answer: 20 hours.
So it only takes 20 hours to get good at fighting games, of course, and you might look online and find a whole bunch of other people getting good at various things, like this guy who gets good at a whole bunch of different things, and
I've
he
heard
makes it
of a
look
lot of
so
people
easy.
extending their breath holds to 2, 3, and even 4 minutes within
See,
just a matter of weeks of training. And
normal people, in a matter of weeks of training, could just hold their breath for 4 minutes. All of this stuff is really not that difficult, right? So you just have to get to that 20 hours mark, and then, you know, you'll be pretty good. Now, if you've ever tried to learn a skill that was really difficult, or try to get into some kind of competitive scene or something like that, and if it hasn't been that easy for you, like you played 20 hours and you're still not really that good, and you play 40 hours and you're still not really that good, and you play 100 hours and you still don't feel like you're that good, I really only have one question to ask you, and it's probably the same question you're asking yourself. Why are you so bad? Obviously, I'm not being serious. The truth is, it's not really that easy, especially on the competitive side. So, if you just want to pick up a new skill and kind of be good enough to impress your friends or impress people who don't know that much about it or haven't done it that much, a lot of times 20 hours really is enough to just get to that level. But the better you get, the harder it gets to improve. And if you're going for something like uh, winning a competitive tournament with a lot of good players or something like that, all of a sudden it's farther on this side of the graph instead of this side, and you have to work really hard to get there, and it's no longer this easy 20 hours, do it for a couple weeks and you're all of a sudden really good. It's more like you could spend on the scale of hundreds to thousands of hours and maybe you still don't get there. That's how hard it can be. So I think if you get too focused on the mindset of it should be easy, it's really easy to get depressed. But the truth is, a lot of the high goals aren't that easy. So, with that said, you really want to set a reasonable expectation so you don't just become depressed every time you try to pursue a goal and find out that you can't really reach it and it feels like you're not getting closer to it and you're just failing all the time. So if you set some kind of goal like, I want to be the best in the world after playing for 100 hours, that's such an unreasonable goal for almost anything, unless it's something that absolutely no one competes in. That if you set that goal and really believe it and really set your heart on it, you're just going to be disappointed when you don't reach it because it's probably not going to happen. So a better goal would be something like trying to see some minor improvements over a long period of time. And the reason I say it like that is because, again, as you get better, it's harder to improve. And not only that, you'll have more periods where you don't really improve that much, and you might even decline a little bit day to day or for short periods. But as long as you can make some minor improvements over long periods of time, you'll keep getting better. It just might take a while, and that's natural. And you really have to adjust your expectation based on your experience. So, let's say you've been doing an activity for 20 hours, you got to skill level 100 after 20 hours. If you drew a perfectly straight line, it would be the red line, and it would look like you could reach skill level 200 in 40 hours. So, that might be your goal, but then you might say, well, I heard you start improving a little bit slower as you get better, so maybe it'll actually take 60 hours to get to skill level 200. So there's your goal. there's your expectation, you start doing it, and you're like, oh no, I'm at 40 hours and I like barely got any better. And now I'm at 60 hours, I'm still like barely at 120 or whatever. Not even close. I'm just so terrible. Why? I thought it was going to take 40 hours, and then I said maybe 60 hours if I'm bad, and then it's not even close after 60 hours. So, what am I doing wrong? I'm just so terrible. I'm going to quit, and I'm done because I'm just too bad. But really, it's just might be an unreasonable expectation to think that you can climb that fast in that short amount of time, and it might be something everyone has to go through. So, if you can see that you're not going up as fast as you expected, you should adjust your expectation to match what you're experiencing, and instead of just holding on to an old belief that, yep, I should be this high after 60 hours, adjust it and say, all right, maybe I'm not going to be that high. It might take 300 hours to reach my original goal, so that's a more reasonable expectation based on what I've experienced. And if I start doing better than that, I can change it. If I start doing worse than that, I can change it that direction. But if you stick too hard to an unreasonable goal, you're just going to make yourself feel depressed when you don't reach it. And another thing is, you shouldn't judge yourself by higher level standards than the level you are actually at. So, as an example, you might watch people on YouTube or on Twitch or follow people on Twitter who are like the best, because those are going to be the people you follow probably. You're going to watch the people who are really good and follow those people, and then they might do something and they might fail to execute one time on a certain specific trick, and they're like, oh my god, I'm terrible. That was awful. I should never mess that up, or something like that. But if you're an average player, you don't want to hold yourself to that same standard. For you, it might be a great success to do that thing one time, where on a pro level, it would be a terrible thing to mess it up. For an average player, it might be great to just do it. So, again, you want to adjust your expectation based on your experience and use your own level to determine your own standards of what you think is good for you and bad for you. And you don't just want to, like, if you join a community where everyone's good and they're all like, wow, it did so terrible because they made some small mistakes, you don't want to necessarily hold yourself to that same level until your experience goes up and you're actually at that level. So as you start getting better, you can start adjusting your expectation higher, and you can start setting the bar higher. And if you don't get depressed too easily, you can technically set the bar pretty high at the start, and if it doesn't get you down too much, that's okay. But you don't want to set it so high that you're just always depressed and not feeling not feeling good because you never reach your standard that was too high. Another related topic is talent. So a lot of times people will just look at someone else and they'll say, well, this guy did it in like 30 days and I've spent years and I can't do it. But something you have to consider first of all is, how serious are you doing the thing? How efficiently are you doing it? How much help do you have? Do you have like a team behind you? Do you have a group of people who are helping you coming up with new ideas? Do you have a coach or stuff like that? And how much prior knowledge do you have in things related to that? Or how much experience do you have sometimes just with getting really good at something? Like, I could say I have experience with getting the world record in Mario Kart Wii, and that's taught me a lot about how serious you have to do things to really get good at them. And it's not just like you can't just play it every now and then for a long period of time. So I do have some other similar stories, and maybe I should mention that this last point, that you really want to be careful about comparing without knowing all the details. So I do have two related stories I can share. So with Puyo Puyo, I'd actually been playing the game, or I learned about the game over 10 years ago, probably 11 years ago, and started playing it shortly after I learned it. And I didn't play it constantly throughout all the 11 years, but I did have periods where I played the game a whole bunch, just like played it on my DS against computers and played hundreds of matches over and like every day, things like that. And I played Prio Versus online and would play it like a whole thousands, tens of thousands of matches on there. But so I went to a fighting game tournament and I won Prio Tetris, and then a lot of people in the fighting game community are like, we're probably looking at it thinking like, oh, this guy just picked up the game and he's really good at it. But they probably didn't know that I played it for like 10 to 11 years. I also watched a lot of high level matches throughout that time. And so I had a lot of prior experience, I had a lot of practice, and I also had experience with getting really good at doing something before. So if you tried to compare without knowing all those details, you might look at it and think, well, I've been playing this for like months and I'm not even close to that level. But it's kind of like, of course you're not going to be close to that level. I've been playing it for so many years, and maybe if you're really talented, maybe you can do it, but it's not a reasonable expectation. And for another story, I've been playing DDR since middle school, and I think that's like 15 years or something. I'm not very good at it. Like, I can play songs that aren't really that difficult, and I almost never get a full perfect combo on them. And then I watch these people who are relatively new, and they can just kind of like full perfect combo songs, and it's like, what? I've been playing this for like 15 years. I'm not that good at it. But just like I was saying before, I didn't really play GDR that seriously. This is before I knew anything about competitive scenes. I just had the game and I was like, "Oh, this is the hardest song in the game and I'll just try to pass it, and if I can pass it, I guess I'm good at the game." And then I would play until I could pass it. But when you're like trying to be competitive, you have to not just pass it, you have to like get a full combo, and then you have to not just get a full combo, you have to get full perfect combo essentially, and then go for full marvelous combo to be really really good. But I didn't know any of that. I was just playing, and so I wasn't necessarily playing that seriously. I wasn't playing efficiently to be competitive because I had no idea what that meant, and I didn't have any help. I wasn't a part of any forums, so even though I spent a long time doing it, I didn't really get that good at it. Now, I am good at some aspects of DDRs. I'm not just absolutely terrible at the game, but that's a different topic. More on talent is that if you're not, if you, a lot of people I think have an unreasonable expectation of what talent means. So if you're not the best in the world after like 100 hours, that doesn't mean you're not talented. So if you look at this red line, I think a lot of people think talent is something like this, but I think talent is a lot more like the yellow line instead of the red line. The red line is pretty unrealistic, and pretty much no one can achieve that. Maybe sometimes some people can do it in special situations, but in general, being talented is probably more like the yellow line instead of the red line, where the blue line would be a normal person. So if you're on this yellow line, maybe after 1,000 hours you get to this skill level 200 in this graph, and a normal person takes 1,500 hours. So you're like doing it so much faster than the normal person. But another thing to recognize is you still have to do it so much. If this graph was accurate, you would have to do it like 1,000 hours to get to that level, which is a whole bunch of time. And you're saving so much time compared to the average person, but you're still doing the thing for a whole bunch of time. And I see a lot of people who I believe are pretty talented, but they have too much of an unreasonable expectation that they should be on this red line if they're talented. And so they don't really, they like get here and like, I'm not up here yet. And then they start to feel depressed or feel like they aren't good enough. And then they give up too easily. But I think even if you're really talented, a lot of times you're going to be on this yellow line instead of something like this. And another point to note is if you don't improve as fast as others in a short amount of time, like maybe you're on this blue line instead of this yellow one, doesn't mean you'll never become good. You might be able to learn faster as you play more, so you might start going up faster than other people as you play more. But even if you don't, in general, as long as you just keep on doing the thing, you will eventually get really good, even if you are never that talented. As long as you keep going up and keep playing, you can get really good. So, for some people, that's going to be a put off. Like, uh, you might not like the feeling that you're going to have to spend maybe twice as long doing the thing to get as good as someone else. But I do believe that as long as you keep doing it, you're in general going to get a lot better no matter how untalented you might be. And a lot of people also, I think, tend to consider themselves not very talented, even if they are. So, if I were to summarize what I think the key to improving is, it's doing the thing a lot. So, that's in big font and in bold and in italics. In general, you're not going to improve if you don't do the thing a lot. So, um, pretty much it's just that. You just have to do the thing a lot. But number 2 is an important point. So, it's possible that you do the thing a lot and you don't necessarily become much better at the thing. And that's where number 2 comes in, because you have to make sure you're focusing on the right skills and points and you are going in the right direction. So, when I first started playing fighting games pretty seriously with Street Fighter 4, I was really focused on combos, and I was like, I've got to do the best combos all the time, and I've got to hit them perfectly all the time, and that's the most important thing, so I'm going to practice that a lot. And so I did that, but I never really got that much better because it wasn't the right thing to focus on. It wasn't the right skill, and it wasn't the right point. So I was kind of just pretty much staying even, and I didn't know what the right direction was. So that's an example of you could do something a lot, but not necessarily get better at it. But number 1 is still the bold point, because you could know the right direction, you could know the right skills, but if you don't do the thing a lot still, even if you know how to get better at it, you're not going to get better at it anyway. So number 1 is still the biggest point, but if you do number 1 and you're not really getting better, you might need number 2 as well. And then there's some other things way down here, like maybe having the right practice environment or having a good mindset or some other things like that. And those actually don't matter as much as you might think. Like, you could be a toxic person, you could have a very negative mindset, you could get mad at the game all the time. But as long as you do number 1, you'll probably get better, and if you do number 1 and number 2, you'll almost surely get better, even if you're always like upset, you're always depressed, you're always down, you don't have a good mindset. If you do number 1 and number 2, you're probably gonna improve. You just might not have fun along the way, but you'll probably improve. And I have a short point about guides and training videos. In general, there's no one special secret that you have to know, and knowing it all of a sudden makes you really good. So, for example, if you think about if you've ever taken music lessons, like piano lessons, if you hire a piano teacher, they aren't going to just tell you some special secret to playing the piano and then you magically go home and you just play the piano really good all of a sudden. It's more like they tell you something to practice, and then you have to practice it really hard on your own, like 30 minutes every day or something like that. You practice it regularly, practice it a lot, and do it a lot, and then you get better at it. So the guides really are more for, they're more for number two here. So they make sure you're focusing on the right skills and you're going in the right direction, but you still have to do the thing a lot. So um, I've made a lot of guide videos and things like that, but they aren't intended to make you immediately good after you watch it one time. It's more like this is what you have to focus on in order to get better. But if you actually want to get better, you have to practice it a lot and do it a lot and think about it a lot. So, again, these types of videos can teach you what to focus on, but you still have to practice it. So, for some last thoughts, I really want to emphasize that a lot of the high level goals are hard. It's just hard. And if you go into it with the mindset of it ought to be easy, it should be easy, what often happens is that you come out depressed when you don't reach the initial goal you set because the initial goal was just too unrealistic. And so um, I think it's really important to understand that a lot of these things really are hard. And when you start getting to the highest goals, like best in the world or something like that, there's no guarantee you'll ever make it because um, for best in the world, say, like, that means you have to beat everyone else, including the people who are like absolutely crazy about the thing, do it 12 hours every day. It's the only thing they do. They love it that much. You have to beat all those people. You have to beat the people who have the most natural talent. You have to beat the people who have the most combination of talent and desire to do the thing. And there's no guarantee you'll ever beat all of them. So, when you go for these really high goals, you can never guarantee you'll actually make it. For some people, I think that's kind of that makes them not want to do it, but for other people, like for me, that's actually a motivator. Like it's like I don't know if I'll ever make it, so I have a reason to try to see if I can actually make it, but that depends on the person. And then if you over focus on a really high goal, that can easily be depressing. So like if you're like I'm gonna become top 10 in the world or something like that. Again, that's a goal that there's no guarantee you'll ever be able to make. So if you just focus on that goal too much and just the goal and just the outcome and reaching the goal, it might not happen for a very long time or it might never happen. And then you might just feel really depressed because you never reached the goal. So a lot of times it's better to just put more focus on your own improvement, seeing that you're doing something better the next day than the previous day. And again, sometimes it takes a longer period of time to see improvement. And also, if you just love doing the thing, it's a lot easier to keep going. So, if you just do it because you love it and you just keep doing it, eventually you'll get really good. But if you only set some really high goal, like I've just got to be best in the world, then you might never reach it and it becomes hard to keep going because it's it's a hard goal to reach. And then I'd say you should try to understand which side of the graph your goals fall on. So for a lot of casual observers of things, they aren't really going to know the difference between a skill that's on this side of the graph and a skill that's on this side of the graph. Like, if you told me um, holding your breath for like 4 minutes versus holding your breath for like 11 minutes, I wouldn't know what. Like, they both seem really hard to me, but really, 4 minutes is probably more on this side of the graph. You can do it in a couple weeks of practice, even for an average person. 11 minutes is probably more on this side of the graph, where you're competing for the best in the world and you never know if you're going to make it, and you're going to have to spend thousands of hours maybe practicing the skill. So that's something you really want to make sure you're aware of. Like, are you setting a goal that's on this side of the graph or is it on this side of the graph? The ones on the left side are generally pretty easy and are just going to take a bit of practice, like maybe some serious practice and some advice on how to get there, but you should be able to reach it in reasonable time. The goals on this side of the graph are the ones that take a whole bunch of dedication, a lot of hours, a lot of training, just a lot of practice, and some of them you may never reach or they may be really tough to reach. And the last point I want to make is you can probably do it if you try for most of these goals, even the really high ones. For all of them except the ones that are like best in the world, that one has no guarantee, but most of them, no matter how hard it seems, you can probably do it if you try, but you probably have to try really hard. And I think people underestimate both of those. They either think, I could never ever do that no matter how hard I try, and that's not true. And then people underestimate on the other end and they say, well, I I could probably do that if I just spend a couple weeks doing it. And no, actually you have to try really hard and spend a bunch of hours, like hundreds to thousands of hours, but you could do it. So it is something that I think you should try to understand. You probably can do it if you try, but you probably have to try really hard. So that's all I have for this video, and I hope it's helpful to someone.